The last balloon drifted against the ceiling fan, spinning slowly like it didn't know the celebration was already over, and the silence that followed felt louder than the music ever had. Paper cups lay tipped over on the table, frosting smeared like careless fingerprints, and the front door stood half open, letting in a thin blade of afternoon light that cut across the living room floor. It was in that quiet, after everyone had laughed and left, that the weight of being forgotten pressed down harder than any crowd ever could. Just when the emptiness threatened to swallow the room whole, one presence remained, steady and unexpected, turning a moment of abandonment into something that would change everything. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of people who stay when they don't have to, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Touch. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. The party had been meant to mark a new beginning for Arman Haleem, or at least that was what he had told himself when he agreed to host it. 37 years old, recently laid off from a job he had given 15 loyal years to, and quietly nursing the sting of a marriage that had ended without drama but with deep, lingering sadness, he had convinced himself that inviting people over would prove he was still connected, still seen. The decorations were simple and daytime bright, pale blue streamers catching sunlight, a homemade banner taped slightly crooked above the window. He had baked the cake himself that morning, hands dusted with flour, heart heavy with cautious hope. Friends from work, neighbors, distant relatives, all had promised to stop by, and for a few hours the house had been full of noise and movement, laughter echoing off walls that had grown too used to silence. But as afternoon slid toward evening, excuses began to pile up like empty plates. One by one, people glanced at their phones, murmured apologies, and slipped out the door. Traffic, errands, sudden obligations, the polite lies people tell when staying feels inconvenient. Arman smiled through all of it, nodding, telling each of them it was fine, that he understood, even as his chest tightened a little more with every goodbye. By the time the last guest left, the music still played to no one, and the banner sagged as if tired of pretending. He stood alone in the middle of the room, sunlight fading, wondering why needing people always seemed to end the same way. He began cleaning mechanically, stacking plates, wiping crumbs into his palm, trying not to look at the untouched slices of cake. Each movement felt heavier than the last, like he was packing away not just decorations, but the last proof that he mattered to anyone beyond polite obligation. The house felt too big, every sound echoing back at him. He told himself this was adulthood, that expectations were dangerous things, and that solitude was safer than disappointment. Still, the quiet hurt. Then he noticed that one chair hadn't been pushed back under the table. A half-full glass of water caught the light untouched. For a moment, he wondered if he had imagined it, but then he felt it, a presence that hadn't left with the others. Near the window stood Liana Farouk, a woman he knew only loosely, a volunteer from the community center where he sometimes helped on weekends. She had arrived early, helped arrange the food, laughed easily without trying to dominate the room. Somehow, in the slow unraveling of the afternoon, she had simply stayed. Liana didn't rush to fill the silence or pretend nothing was wrong. She moved calmly, gathering discarded napkins, straightening a chair, as if staying was the most natural thing in the world. Her presence shifted the air in the room, turning the emptiness into something softer, more bearable. Arman felt a strange mix of embarrassment and relief. Part of him wanted to apologize for the awkwardness, to explain himself, while another part clung desperately to the fact that he wasn't completely alone. Sunlight streamed in through the window, catching dust motes in the air, turning the ordinary living room into something almost cinematic. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with daytime life, children's voices distant, a lawnmower droning somewhere down the street. Inside, time seemed to slow. Liana's calm didn't erase Arman's disappointment, but it steadied it, like a hand resting gently on a trembling surface. Arman's life, in recent years, had been a quiet series of losses that never quite rose to the level of tragedy but accumulated all the same. The job loss had shaken his sense of identity, the marriage's end had left him doubting his worth, and the party's anticlimax felt like confirmation of his worst fears. He struggled with the thought that maybe he had misjudged his place in people's lives, that maybe he was always more invested than anyone else. Standing there, surrounded by half-deflated balloons, he felt exposed, like the decorations had been stripped away to reveal something fragile underneath. Liana seemed to sense this without a word being spoken. She didn't offer forced cheer or empty reassurance. Instead, she matched his pace, working quietly beside him, letting the shared task become a bridge between two people standing in the aftermath of unmet expectations. Her eyes, thoughtful and observant, took in the room and the man at its center, not with pity but with a kind of steady respect. It was a look Arman hadn't realized he was craving. As they worked, the room slowly transformed, trash bags filled, surfaces cleared, the chaos of celebration reduced to order. With each small task completed, Arman felt a subtle shift inside himself. The sting of being left behind didn't vanish, but it dulled, replaced by something warmer, something like gratitude. He realized how rarely people chose to stay once the fun was over, how most were drawn only to the bright moments, not the quiet aftermath. Liana's decision to remain felt deliberate, meaningful in a way he struggled to put into words. The daylight outside softened, turning golden, casting long shadows across the floor. In that gentle light, Arman found himself reflecting on all the times he had left early, made excuses, chosen convenience over connection. He wondered how many moments like this he had missed, how many chances to truly see someone beyond the surface. The realization brought with it a mix of regret and resolve. Perhaps this unexpected stillness was offering him something he hadn't known to ask for. Liana eventually sat at the table, hands folded loosely, her posture relaxed but attentive. The cake remained between them, slightly lopsided but lovingly made. Arman felt a sudden urge to explain himself, to justify why the party mattered so much, why the emptiness hurt. Instead, he allowed the silence to speak for him. In that shared quiet, he felt understood without needing to perform or impress. It was a rare and precious feeling. What Arman didn't know then was that Liana carried her own quiet history of staying. Years earlier, she had been the one left behind, the friend who lingered after hospital visits, the volunteer who closed up the center after everyone else had gone home. Life had taught her that endings revealed more about people than beginnings ever could. When she saw the way Arman's smile faded as the door closed behind the last guest, something in her recognized the familiar ache of being overlooked. Staying hadn't felt like a decision so much as a responsibility to kindness. As the afternoon edged toward evening, the house no longer felt empty. The absence of others no longer screamed failure but whispered possibility. Arman felt lighter, not because his problems were solved, but because someone had witnessed his disappointment and chosen not to turn away. The simple act of presence reshaped the narrative he had been telling himself all day. Maybe being left didn't always mean being unworthy. Maybe it sometimes meant making space for the right person to remain. In the days that followed, that afternoon lingered in Arman's thoughts. He found himself approaching life differently, less eager to impress, more willing to be honest about where he stood. He returned to the community center with renewed purpose, volunteering not to fill time but to connect. Liana remained a steady presence, their bond growing quietly, rooted in that shared moment of stillness. There was no rush, no dramatic declarations, just a mutual understanding that some connections are built not in crowds, but in the spaces they leave behind. The memory of the party transformed from a source of embarrassment into a quiet turning point. Arman began to see that the value of an experience wasn't measured by numbers or noise, but by depth and sincerity. One person staying, truly staying, had outweighed a roomful of polite guests,